So I am really pleased to present Miss Gretchen, and she is with Indian Ladder Farm. And you can see we're standing in the orchard. So hi, Miss Gretchen, how are you?
Hello, I'm good. How is everybody doing? It's a nice chilly fall day here at Indian Ladder Farms. You can see we have the nice clouds, nice fluffy, sort of turning gray, but still beautiful, dark blue sky. This is what we call apple picking weather. Everybody, we're right at our peak season. This weekend will be our busiest weekend of the year, Columbus Day, Indigenous Day is the peak time to pick apples here in upstate New York. We're standing out here in the orchard where we're standing next to some golden delicious apples right now. Most of them have been picked by our pick your own friends already. Um, I'll tell you a little bit about our farm. Our farm was founded in 1915. It was founded by Peter Tenike. Peter Tenike was a politician in Albany, and it was getting a little crowded in the city. So he wanted to keep his family on a rural plot, um, and he ended up settling here at Indian Ladder Farms. Now, at the time that he was settling out here at Indian Ladder Farms, he was also helping in the creation of our state park right here up on top of the escarpment, which you can see a little bit of a piece of it over there, the Helderbergs. And the name of that park is Thatcher Park. At Thatcher Park, there is a trail, a famous trail. It's called the Indian Ladder Trail. The Indian Ladder Trail sits above our farm. And as they were creating it, we figured that's how Peter came up with our name. Now, Native Americans would take pine trees, which we have a lot of around here, have those nice straight branches that come out. Native Americans would take the nice sturdy poles and cut down some footholds of those branches, lash them together, and lash them onto the cliffs, which we'll see when we're walking in a few minutes. You'll see the cliffs that they used to have to get up and down. And that's what they would use those ladders for. And so that's part of how we got our name here. We've been in business for over 100 years. When it was first purchased, this farm was a dairy farm. So down at the end of the farm, we have a whole bunch of animals. We do not farm animals anymore. We have them for exhibition purposes, for education, so that we can help kids put food and where it comes from into their psyche when they come out here. You can see how a farm might operate. But all of our production is actually agricultural. What we sell the apples. We also have some summer crops that keep us going in a pick your own operation all the way from June through the end of October. And that's a little bit of our history. I'm assuming we want to talk a little bit about how we grow our apples. I don't know if anyone has questions about where we are.
We don't have any questions yet about where we
Okay.
are, but I know we would love to see what that apple life cycle looks like.
Okay, so right now we see our apple trees have apples on them, but they don't start that way in the spring. In the spring, they start like all the other trees, no leaves, all gone to sleep. And in the spring, we will get a blossom before we get too many leaves. And now this is your apple blossom. They're all the same. They all have five leaves, five petals. I'm sorry. And that becomes important later on. Each one of those five petals needs to be visited by our friend the bee. Is everybody good friends with bees? Because in order to have food, we need to have the bees. We actually don't have enough bees here on the farm of our own. So we get bees brought in at the beginning of April when our trees bloom. We have Rulson's apiary, which is what you call a person who farms bees. It's an apiary, isn't it? Yes. Okay. I was confused. So they bring us in boxes of bees. We have about to every acre, you need about a box of bees, a nest of bees. So we come in and every so far spaced in the orchard, they put the bee boxes out, and then our friends go to work. and they have to get from tree to tree. So pollination of an apple is actually, I'm losing my headset, so I'm going to fix that. The pollination of an apple has to be cross pollinated. So that means it needs the pollen from a different type of apple. So this golden delicious apples pollen could mix with, down further we have some red Jonah gold apples, and they have to be cross pollinated. So a bee has to come from here, go over to the other apples, and once all of that is done, and if it works out perfectly, we will end up with a very, very pretty round apple that looks somewhat like that. And then if we were to open that apple up, we would see what happened to that blossom. That blossom becomes the seeds and the center of your apple, and it makes a star. And if we count the pieces, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 seeds in an apple. So those 5 seeds were the 5 petals that were touched perfectly and pollinated well, so that we now have this delicious fruit. Now the fruit grows around the seeds in order to feed the seeds and grow the seeds, because what an apple is actually just the way that a tree reproduces. So the fruit that we love so much is meant to feed those seeds until they're grown to the size where they could actually grow a tree. Does anybody have any questions about that?
Yeah, we do. So Olivia and Eliana want to know, so how long does it take for an apple to grow from the beginning, from that blossom?
So from that blossom is in April. So then we have May, June, July, August, and September. So about 5 months for an apple to become an apple, to go from the blossom to the apple fruit. Now, the trees, we usually get our trees at about 3 years old. They do produce apples, but not enough for us to use in production. So we usually have them in the ground a full 2 years prior to picking apples from them. So at about 5 years is when we'll get enough of a yield to open it up for pick your own, or for our teams to go out and harvest.
So you're taking really good care of these trees before you ever get to harvest an apple from them.
Before you ever get to harvest an apple from the trees, they are very well taken care of. Even in the winter here, we're not sleeping and taking farmers' naps. We're out here pruning apple trees. Now, this is an apple that did not pollinate correctly, probably had too many blossoms on its stem when it happened. So you could see there are actually 3 apples grown together. And this is what we call the fun apples. We have a great collection of these by the end of the year. And they're just super fun to look at. We got a triplet. We've got twins. Look at those guys. I don't know if anyone has twins or triplets in their classrooms. And look at this guy. This is an actual face that this little apple made. So those are some of the fun apples. If they don't get pollinated correctly, that's what will happen. This is a great example of an apple that would not have all of its seeds. So this apple, this seed would not have been pollinated. And so the fruit doesn't grow around it. So you end up with a flat apple. And if I were to open this up, I would say we probably have 2 seeds, this side and this side.
Very neat. And Mrs. Bertolo's class on Long Island, her student Austin wants to know, why are apples different color? And Kara wants to know along that line, how long does it take for an apple to turn from green to red? We saw some color variation.
Yes, yes. Well, so we have all, just like all our pets and all different types of tomatoes, different types of fruits. There are many, many, many varieties of apples. The Golden Delicious stays gold. It does get a little bit of a pink blush on it at the end of the year, at the end of its cycle. But they all pretty much start out as little green balls in the spring. And as they mature, the redness comes in. And in order for an apple to turn red, it needs to be touched by the sun. So sometimes if you go on apple picking and you picked an apple off the tree, it looks perfect and red, and you pull it out and there's a green spot in the back. That's because the sun hasn't gotten to it. That process usually starts probably around July, mid-July, when the color starts coming out. Um, and that's how that happens. And obviously yellow apples are they stay yellow, but they do mostly have most of them do have pink blushes on them.
So as we start to transition, Genevieve from Nunde and Keshikwa School, she wants to know how long does it take to plant all the seeds from those apples?
Oh, well, we actually do not plant seeds anymore. When we purchase trees that are already put together, because an apple tree cross-pollinates. When you get that seed out of the apple, it could be a yellow delicious apple, or it could be a Jonah Gold apple, or it could be a mix of the two. So in order to keep the varieties straight and real and true to the characteristics, all of our apple trees are grafted. We buy grafted trees from Cornell University. We work with Cornell University on, we have experimental apples in the back orchard that we grow with them. And so we actually don't plant seeds, but it would take a long time. And it does take a long time to plant the trees as well. We get in a whole lot of trees, and it might be a week-long project to plant maybe 3 rows of these, because now trees are developed to be a little bit smaller. And you'll notice that there are lots of times that they're staked up and put on poles and almost, here's a funny word, espalard, like we would do with other fruit, so that they grow wide and short, and we can get more trees into a smaller space, and they
Awesome. So I
and they
think
produce the same yield.
as we transition from
Mm-hmm.
being there with you in the orchard and these apples are getting harvested either by people who come to visit your farm or by the staff on your farm, where do they head? Where could people buy some of your apples?
Well, so you can buy our apples right here on the farm. Like you said, we do a pick your own operation where you can come in and pick your own apples. We also harvest and sell in our retail store, which we're walking up towards now. And we also wholesale. So we send apples out to our local grocery stores. We are a small farm, so we don't have like a national bandwidth for apples, but during the season, we share our apples at Hannaford's. We have an honest weight co-op that we work with. And sometimes if we have enough, we can do some of the local price choppers as well.
Miss Gretchen, we have a question from Miss Goki's class at the
Uh-huh.
Aquapasni Mohawk School. They want to know, how do apples get their taste?
Apples get their taste, not as 90% water, and the rest is sugar. So that is why we like them so much. And the sugars develop in the fruit to help feed those seeds.
And
Um,
then
they play with the taste. Like right now, a lot of taste characteristics when we hybridize or we modify and we mix apples, like we're doing with Cornell and those experimental trees. They they cross apples, and then they try to keep the trees that show the best characteristics, and then from that tree they'll take the branches and they will continue to grow those. It takes about 10 to 15 years to get an apple from the beginning of hybridizing out into the market, because it takes a long time to get it to have the right disease resistance, to have the right amount of time when it will become ripened. All of those things can be shaped by our playing with crossbreeding apples and modifying them. And it's quite the science. Cornell University has a breeding an apple breeding program, and that's who we work with. So they're a leader right now in bringing out some of the newer varieties that everybody likes. Snapdragons are one of our big apples here in New York. I don't know if anybody has those in their stores yet. I had a, a tour here from a cruise ship that comes up the Hudson, and they had Snapdragons, and I think they were from Texas. So they're starting to get out there in a larger quantity now. But that's one that just came out a few years ago and actually got named. Up until an apple gets named, it's assigned a number. So we have at the end of the season, we usually bring in some of our experimental Cornell numbered apples for people to try. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not so good.
It's really neat that people have a choice and a say in
Mm-hmm.
the varieties that
Yep.
they're looking for and what they like.
Yep.
And who knows, if you hit the farm on the right day, you could be part of that study.
That's right. That's right. And then we're going to walk in here to our apple barn right now. We'll hope we keep the video going for you. We had a little trouble this morning, but we have so many different varieties of apples. We grow 40 plus varieties here on our farm, but there are hundreds of varieties of apples. Some of my favorite, we're coming up here to the Empire apple. That's a great New York apple, which is a mix between a Macintosh and a golden delicious or a red delicious. It's one or the other. And that's one of my favorite pie apples if anyone wants to make a pie. Pink luster is one of these Cornell apples that just came out from the Cornell apple breeding program. We also have our Snapdragons down here and Honeycrisp, which is an apple that everybody knows. That's a good example of the hybridizing. They've modified the Honeycrisp so that it has a cell size that is twice the size of a regular apple. So when you bite into these, that is what gives it its characteristic. I'm going to do it for you. Snappy crunch.
Well, we have
The
a
juice.
question very
Mm-hmm.
a question on apples. Miss Bigness's class wants to know, what is the world's smallest apple? The one in your hand looks pretty big. What is the world's smallest?
The world's smallest apple, I would say it would have to be some type of a crab apple. I have Blue in here. Maybe he knows a small apple. No? Smallest apples? Ruby Max and Galas have a smaller size, but there's a whole variety of apple called crab apples, which we intersperse in our orchards for pollination reasons. But those apples are tiny, like cherry size. So I would say a crab apple is going to be your smallest apple.
And then one of our classrooms wants to know, what is the largest apple?
Mm. Wolf River, or I've seen some of these Matsu apples here that can get pretty large.
Wow, really big.
Yep. And the Wolf Rivers are even bigger. We don't sell them in the store. They're not very good eating apples. So we're actually phasing them out, but they're very cool to look at because they're so large. And this year, because we've had such a really nice summer for growing, some of our apples that aren't usually very large are extremely large this year, having collected all the perfect amount of water. Like this is a Cortland apple, for example, that would be the same size as a Macintosh in most years.
Wow.
And they are just growing big and beautiful.
Now, Mrs. Biviano's third grade class wants to know, what apple do you sell the most of?
Honeycrisp is our number one seller. But we
And
sell all these apples. So someone in the other tour had asked, like, all of these apples will be gone before the weekend, and we have a whole nother set ready up downstairs to go. We sell lots and lots of apples. Even though people come to pick, they also come in and buy these apples.
Mrs. Drzezinski's third graders want to know, how do they choose the names of the apples?
I think it's like the stars or any type of an organism, whoever it is that makes it gets to name it. And usually I think they come, like some are mixes of the old names, but I think whoever gets to do the actual, whoever comes up with it, whoever was in the design of it gets to come up with the name.
And we have from Mrs. Goodling's class, how many varieties of apples do you grow and sell? They seem like a lot of different varieties in the
Yeah,
apple.
we grow over 40 varieties. I would say that up in the stores, we usually sell about 25 to 30 of those varieties throughout the season. Some have come and gone already. Some are still to come in. Usually, like Northern Spies are our last to come in, and we're starting to get those in the store. Um, but we sell, and that's something. If you come out to an apple farm, you will get more of a variety than you will in the grocery store because we can grow them on a smaller scale here for the pick your own, where like large commercial operations will grow all, so many of one kind. Um, so that's a kind of a nice thing about coming out to an actual farm. You get to see all that different variety in
And
action.
Miss Alvy's class wants to know as we transition to our next stop, how do you know if your trees are healthy?
Well, that is our farm manager, Kelly's job. And we work closely with a crop manager, and our crop manager comes from Cornell again. Um, and if we notice something is happening to the trees, a new pesticide, a new pest, a new leaves are falling, she will get in touch with them to see about what we should do. Um, and that is her process. And that is her process for doing that. And she's in charge of doing all that. She is all out scouting in the field. You'll see her running around in her little four-wheeler going around testing apples. She's one of our besties because she comes in and she will have apples for us from the field. Um, and so she is in charge of taking care of all of that, of the pruning, of the pest control, of all of that. One second, because I'm turn the light on.
We had a little trouble with the last virtual field trip going into the cider pressing area. So
Cider
give
press.
us give us just a moment to get
The
reconnected
guys, okay?
here. Oh,
Okay.
here we are, Miss Gretchen. Okay, we had a little bit of trouble hearing you and we froze for a little bit, but it looks
Yeah.
like we might be in a good place. So where are we now?
Okay. So right now we're inside looking through our observation window at our cider mill. So this is our cider press where we make some of the best cider you'll ever have, if I do say so myself. um, the cider press we run every day from as soon as we start bringing in apples, because one of our main, besides apples that we sell, is an apple cider donut, and we use our own apple cider in the donuts to make them. So as soon as we start pressing apples, as soon as we start getting apples, we start pressing. um, I can explain to you what all this equipment does. If you're interested in watching the video, we do have a video. If you look up Indian Ladder Farm cider making video, you should be able to get that, and it'll show the press in operation. Um, if you want to look, we have them numbered. Number one is just where we put our pallet of apples. We usually have a crate of apples. Right now, there's a box there. That's the containers they're going to fill, because once they come back from lunch, they start to bottle and clean. So number one is what the apple crate goes on. It dumps the apples out onto our conveyor belt, which takes it through a washing cycle. So all the apples get washed. They climb up number three right there with the little paddles on it. climb up that ladder, and then they fall down into number 4, which is our big, huge grinder, and it grinds all the apples up. They have their cores, they have their stems, everything is their skins, gets all ground up and comes out in the consistency of applesauce when it goes through there. Now, if you look over this way, you can get a picture of the trays and the cloths. Those trays and cloths will be layered on the rolling cart, and one layer will one cloth will hold the applesauce, and then it'll get layer on until it's as tall as that machine, and then it slides back there and it gets pressed up into it. It actually like moves up to the top, and all the juice comes out down into number 6, which is the tub. And then the clear tube that runs through it that has a little bit of the brown liquid left in it, that goes over to our other side where we have our fancy UV pasteurizing
Oh, Miss
machine.
Gretchen, we're
We're one
breaking
of the
up.
first farms in the state to use a UV pasteurizer for our cider. And the UV pasteurization means we don't have to heat our cider.
Oh, we're breaking, Miss Gretchen, we're breaking up. Miss Gretchen, we're breaking up a
So
little bit.
we don't have to boil it. It's injected. Are we back? Are we? Can you hear me
There.
now?
Okay, I
I don't
think
think
we're
we have
back a little
anything.
bit, but I just wanted to make sure everyone
Okay.
knew that you have a light system. You use UV light
We use
to
UV
pasteurize.
light. Right. So we use a UV light to pasteurize, which means we do not have to heat our cider. So all of our cider is the closest thing you're going to get from an apple being in a cup. So it's apple to cup, no processing, no additives, nothing added to it in the process, and
And
it's
and
absolutely
pas
delicious.
pasteurization might be a term that we've heard before, maybe not. It's a term we
Mm-hmm.
sometimes think about in dairy when we think about milk, that milk has
Yep.
been pasteurized and you're killing any bacteria that might spoil the apple cider, or in this case, or milk in the case of dairy.
Yep. Yep. It kills all the germs. Up to 99.99% of all of the bacteria is wiped out by that machine. And that's what allows us to sell it in the store.
And what are we looking at here? All these crates.
All of these crates are full of apple cider that has been pressed this year. This will be put into our apple cider, our hard apple cider production. We have a cidery and a brewery on the property. So all of these containers will be turned into hard cider eventually.
And we have
I'm
a
going to
couple of,
walk down this
yeah,
way. Are we
that would be
still
great.
good? Go ahead. Go
And we
ahead
have
if
a
you have
couple of questions,
questions.
some that our students didn't hear about the cider process. Oliver wanted to know, is there a machine that peels the
Okay.
apples before they go into cider?
Nope, they go right in with their peels, their cores, their seeds, everything. And I have here in my hand a picture of what's left over, an example of what's left over after you press the cider. So this is what's left of the apples and the peels. And if you look inside there, you might be able to see a seed. There's a seed, and this is all that's left once all the juice is taken out of the apples, and this is called pomace.
And what do you do with that pomace?
Here on the farm, we compost it. We don't use it to feed animals or anything like that, but it's just we use it in our compost pile. I think we should try and make something out of it, walls or cardboard or something, but I haven't found the engineer to do that yet.
Aha, that's a great thought. So all of
Yeah,
you out there, start thinking about what you
start
could do with
thinking
that.
about it. Absolutely,
Miss Gretchen
absolutely.
wants your ideas.
Lots of headway being made in the farming industry using our byproducts for new types of packaging, things like that. So
And
I'm
Kinsey
gonna
wants to know how many apples does it take to make a gallon of cider?
to make a gallon of cider. I'm not sure, but one of those totes makes about 70 gallons of cider. So an apple crate, if I know it, like these down here that have the pumpkins in them, that carries about 800 pounds of apples when it's full. And one of those will make 70 gallons of cider,
And Mrs.
which is
Goodling's
pretty
class
good.
wants to know, just a last question on cider. How long of a process is it to make apple cider?
To make the apple cider, well, you have to have your apples picked and ready to go. They probably run a barrel through there in about 2 hours from beginning to end is probably what it takes. And they do about 3 to 4 batches in the morning, every morning.
Great, thank you. I think that rounds
Yep.
out our cider questions.
Okay. I'm going to show you inside my big refrigerator door. I'm going to show you how we store our apples because the best way to keep an apple lasting for a while is in your refrigerator. So we have these large refrigerators that we stack our crates in until we can get them through our production, through our sorting operation. And each one of these totes, like I said, carries 800 pounds of apples. They probably go 6 rows deep. And I think we're up to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 high. So that's a lot of apples. And if you look at these cards, this is our system for sorting our apples. We have when they're out in the field, they'll take these cards with them. They write what kind of apple they've picked. They write where they were when they picked it. So this one says block T. That's how our orchard is broken up into blocks. It says the Julian date. So it's not a date that you and I are familiar with, but 25H. And then the harvest crew, that's the initials of who actually picked the apples. And then we have a lot code. So we know where they go. And that's how we keep track. If anything were to go wrong with any of our apples out in the world, we could go back to the very beginning and find out exactly where they came from and get them back to us
I think that's really amazing that you could follow an apple's journey from somebody's
from
hand all
beginning
the
to
way
end.
back to the
Mm-hmm.
farm and the
Yep.
row that it was picked from and what
Yep.
farm in the world it was from. Pretty
Yep.
amazing. Now
Yep. There's a lot that goes into it.
we have a few more questions that our students are sending in. So hopefully I can give you maybe some rapid fire questions.
Sure.
We have a question about from Miss Brooker's class about how many apples are on a tree.
On a good tree, you're going to want to see about you want to see the branches heavy. So I've never counted them, but I know when the trees are ready because they're usually weighed down by the weight of the apples. And I'm going to estimate that 500 apples on a tree would be a very big, good tree. 300 apples on a tree is about what we usually have,
Mrs. Levine's class
I
from
would think.
Salamanca, they want to know were the trees there when Mr. Tonight bought the farm, or did he buy the
Yes,
trees?
we did have some trees. No, there are not any trees probably on the property that were here when the farm was purchased because we actually change trees out every 10 to 13 years, 15 at the long side. So these trees have been replaced. We do have, if you can look up over by the shed there, those are the oldest trees that we have. They're Kendalls, and those are about 50 years old. We keep those, we do weddings and different types of events out in that orchard, and the apples still produce well. So that's like one of our beautiful older sets of apple trees, but that would be the oldest that we had. The rest get replaced on a rotating basis.
Mr. Wolf has a great question, and I'm going to add a question to it. Mr. Wolf's class wants to know how many people work on your farm, and I'm going to add what are the different types of jobs they have.
Okay, so right now, while we're at our peak this year, we have about 70 people on payroll. They do anything from apple production, which is our farm crew is about 14 people. They come to us every year from Jamaica. They come on a program with the government called an H2A program. So we connect with the government of Jamaica. And we get visas. We have 14 folks come up. They've been come years. A lot of them are the same. We're all good friends. And they come up and they pick all the apples. The rest of us do things like this. We work in the retail store. We work with the restaurants that we have open. We have our beer garden and tasting room. We run events during this time of the year. We have festivals every weekend. This weekend is going to be the Hawaiian Oktoberfest, so they're getting ready for that. I personally am the education coordinator. So what I do here on the farm is tours. We also hold classes. We have a summer barn school where we come in and people learn and the kids learn about working on a farm and they get to know the animals and how we do the apples, all of that stuff. Um, so we have a lot of food service folks. We have bookkeepers. We have managers, any kind of a retail position. And we have those farm positions. We have about four other farm positions that are not held by the H2A workers. So we have a delivery driver because we take deliveries out. There are a lot of things you could do on a farm. Um, oh yes, and then we other parts of the education things that we do art classes. So coming out here onto the farm using the natural landscape for art classes. My friend Mary Grace, who does tours with me, she also teaches. We have wreath making classes. We have uh, we'd like to start some food classes, you know, how to preserve your harvest, things like that. We do those types of classes. And it's a very nice scenic backdrop for a lot of art type situations. We have had exercise classes. So we've had some people who come out here and they love to come out and do yoga. It's more of a summer thing. Once you get into this weather, you might be a little chilly at 8 in the morning.
Well, Miss Gretchen, we can't thank you enough for your time and showing us Indian Ladder Farm. It's a very special place, and we appreciate that you're able to show us around. Thanks so much, and thanks to our classrooms today.
Yes, thank you all for coming. Anyone that's interested, we're open. We do on-site tours if you want to come out and play, and come pick apples.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.